Hey guys, LC Holt here, and this is my update for the week of October 29th, the week of Halloween. So we're going to talk about Halloween, the new Halloween movie. But before we do that, I got to give a shout out once again to the Butcher's Bluff Indiegogo campaign. That's a film I'm going to be doing next year in Texas. There's a new video up and some new perks. If you go down to the description in the YouTube video, or if you go to the follow the thread on Twitter, or go to the comment section in Facebook, you'll be able to find out everything you need to know about this movie and how you can contribute to the making of it. Now, my guest on the show, there he is right there, Mr. Jarrod Cuthrell. He was in a movie that I directed, and this is the movie. It's called Spiritus. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because almost all of the pre-orders have gone out for this movie. So if you want to own a copy of this movie, hit me up on Facebook or the Twitter or any of that social media stuff, and I'll let you know how you can get a copy of it. Now that those two things are out of the way, we want to jump into this Halloween discussion because everybody seems to be talking about this. The reaction from what I've seen on social media is pretty mixed, to say the least. So I thought it would be fun to have Jarrod on here because Jarrod and I did a show together that was a lot of fun a few months back. So Jarrod, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, LC. Top of the day to you.
Oh man, it's always fun to talk with my old buddy Jarrod. And we actually talked about this a little bit before the show because you went to see the movie. And I posted on Facebook asking people what they thought about it. And you kind of messaged me and we were talking about it a little bit. So I thought it'd be a lot of fun to do it in front of everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
And in more detail. Because last week, me and Jay Burleson talked about it a little bit, but it was one of those things where it was a day after the film came out. And I didn't know how many people had the opportunity to see it on Friday night. So now you've had a full week to watch the movie, sometimes multiple times, and think about it. And so obviously there'll be spoilers in this show because it's kind of hard to do an in-depth film discussion about a movie and not talk about the movie. So just getting that out of the way, there'll be some spoilers. So I guess we'll just jump into the movie itself. I mean, the film, I thought it opened at the very, very beginning really well. Like the first few minutes I was thinking, oh, this seems like a real movie. It seemed like it was well and well acted, and there were some the movie is full of references to the first film and to the other films in the series, but like right off the bat they're talking about like the Smith's Grove Sanitarium, but in modern times they're calling it a rehabilitation center, which I thought was kind of a funny modern kind of joke where you don't call things sanitariums anymore.
Yeah.
But pretty much right off the bat you're introduced to these two characters who are podcasters, and their names are Aaron. I have my cheat sheet over here. Aaron.
I see you peeking at it, yeah.
Yeah, right over here. Let's see, what were those podcast names? Those dramatic bastards. Aaron and Dana, and then you get to meet Dr. Sartain, who is a sort of like a Samuel Loomis type guy, or so he seems for the majority of the movie. He's Michael's psychiatrist. And then after that, they're there to kind of chat it up with Michael, who hasn't spoken. A lot is made about how Michael Myers hasn't spoken in 40 years. So they take him out to this little courtyard area with these really wild tiles. And if you've ever been in like a mental asylum, everything is very white and sterile. You don't want to have anything upsetting, but this courtyard looks like it's fucking, Alice in Wonderland. But that's probably, because there's a lot of high shots and it's colorful and kind of cool to look at from high up. So you just kind of go, oh, it look cool, And so you see Michael Myers there, and he's an old guy. And I was really happy to see he was an old guy. AARP, man. Medicare is paying for his hospital stay. What did you think of this whole section, like the very start of this flick? Did you?
I thought, for me, the opening section of it was probably my favorite part of it. Like, I think it had the strongest opening because it felt I don't know. It had kind of a supernatural feel to it. And, we can back up and just say that I have seen this one, and I've probably seen the first one a long time ago. I do not know if I remember any of it. And I saw the Rob Zombie ones, and I also don't remember those. So I'm coming in this like I've never seen a Halloween movie. So I don't know exactly what is going on with the dude, other than he's just like really tall and menacing. So we'll start there. But past that, yeah. So I liked that whole the whole opening. Um, it's a heightened realism where you're not gonna have like people chained to little sections of a chessboard outside like they kind of are, and they're all reacting to something that they probably don't. I mean, being mental patients, they probably don't know about whatever it is, but it's like making the dogs react and stuff like that. So it's giving it a supernatural feel to it, and it also makes it feel like the 70s movie. Like I can imagine that whole scene with like grain and like the weird cuts jumping around. I like that a whole lot. Um, the podcast thing I like because that does happen now. Like people are doing investigative journalism through podcasting and stuff. So it's a good way to, I think, bring it forward. Um, I will say the new Dr. Loomis. What is the guy's name?
The character is Dr. Sartan.
Dr. Sartan. So he is clearly a bad guy. Like just look at his face right away. Like I feel like if you are someone who's treating those people, you can't already look evil. You have to have some type of calming look to you. And this is a suspicious looking man from the get go.
Right, and he has the. I remember I was watching it I took a friend of mine who is not into horror or Halloween stuff, and so I was kind of coming into it, I guess, kind of the way you were, because she had seen, I think, the first one, but she wasn't really familiar. So I started to think maybe these podcasters, because the podcast they do is like a true crime thing. So Michael Myers is like the latest episode of a true crime podcast.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, okay, these are the exposition characters. If you're not familiar with the other ones, they're here to kind of tell you, okay, well, this is what happened in the first movie, and then sort of the backstory even of the first movie about the little boy and everything. So I was like, okay, well, I can kind of see that. I mean, there were a couple in that opening section for me, a couple little eye roll moments, and I kind of gauged her reaction too to some of these things, her not being a huge fan, because like when the podcaster Aaron, when he reaches into his bag, because he walks up, there's like a yellow square you're not supposed to walk over, and he of course toes the line, and he reaches into his bag and he says, I got a little something from my friend at the district attorney's office, and he pulls out a mask, and I'm thinking, come on, evidence for a podcaster.
Well, but they also could like straight up throw $3,000 at so I mean, I don't know a lot of podcasters that can do that. So I mean, they got like their whole budget they just like threw in the window. So maybe they do have some sway.
That's a good point, because here in a little bit they come up and meet Lori, and they throw some wild cash at her, and she happily accepts. But before we get to that part, there's a lot made in this first section and also throughout the movie about people trying to get Michael to talk, because Michael famously hasn't spoken since he was a little boy, and he killed his sister. So prior to that, we're led to believe he was kind of a normal kid and spoke and everything. And then the night he killed his sister, from then on out, he never spoke again for 40 years. So a lot's made of that. Ultimately, it never pays off. He never speaks. I mean, my thing was, this is what I was thinking, and tell me if you were thinking the same thing. I thought they keep saying, just say one word, and I'm thinking, there was a part of me that kind of cringed, and I was like, oh no, is he going to say like the one word's going to be Halloween? I'm like, oh no. Please tell me that's not going to be it. Go ahead.
No, I don't know. Like, I get if they wanted to, it made sense, I think, again, for the first opening part. I think that made sense. And I'm not familiar, like, if that's been a theme throughout all the movies is to have him try to speak, or like, why isn't he speaking or whatever. But even not seeing them, knowing that it's been going on this long and he hasn't spoken the whole time, there's nothing he could say after this amount of time since Halloween 1 that would pay off in any way. If it had been one or two movies, sure, but like spanning 30 years of movie and film, he can't say anything that's worth him speaking in one line.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And even biologically, if you hadn't used your vocal cords in 40 years, would you even be able to speak? But then again, would you be able to pick up people by their heads and crush them and stomp their face in? And I guess that's mention of disbelief.
Which again, like if you're gonna feed into that supernatural angle of this whole thing, like lean into it a little bit. Like he's not a huge, he's big like as in tall, but he's not like a big, strong, muscular man. He's like a 60-year-old man. And so, what is it that is letting him do these things? If he's not based in supernatural, what is it about him that can let him do this?
And that's an interesting thing I think to bring up because it goes back to, and this movie kind of, obviously John Carpenter hasn't been involved in Halloween since Halloween 3, but in a Michael Myers movie since Halloween 2, which was way back in I think 1981. So he had sort of just been collecting checks for them using his music because obviously they're going to use that music in every movie. So he was very adamant about, I'm done with the story. The story was over after 2. There's nothing more to tell. I'm not interested. And so obviously they got him back to be involved in this in a hands-on way. He's executive producer. He worked with him on the script, and he did a great new score, I thought, for the movie. And but it kind of harkens back to his idea of Michael Myers as being this sort of strange force of nature. It's this sort of, he's human, but he's not really human. Like his big thing was, you don't really need to know why Michael does what he does or how he's doing it, or you know, it's just that he's a representation of just this darkness that just never stops. It just keeps going, like a freight train. You know, you just can't stop it.
Yeah.
And I think that was for the, I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think a lot of the fans of the Rob Zombie versions didn't like the humanization of Michael, giving him a backstory and explaining where his psychosis came from. And, you know, he's a strong guy because he's just physically big. And so this was definitely returning to John Carpenter's original idea of Michael as a force of nature. You know, I mean, even he referred to the character as being the shape. He didn't used to like to call him Michael Myers. And in the credits, they credit him as the shape. You know, it's just the shape in the darkness moving. But let me say, right after that opening scene, you know, you had that credit sequence, which harkens back to the first one. And I did kind of dig the whole idea of the rotting pumpkin that sort of became fresh again. You know, I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting way of doing it.
Sure, on the nose.
Yeah, on the nose. Yeah. Trying to David Gordon Green, who we should say is the director and co-writer of this movie. I think I saw in an interview where he insisted that was like the first thing he said. The credit sequence is going to be a rotting pumpkin that grows back and is fresh again before they really even decided on story points. But another big story point comes right after those credits, which is where we meet Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis again after 40 years. In this continuity, we haven't seen her in 40 years. In reality, we saw her 20 years ago in Halloween H2O, but that never happened. So, you know, we won't talk about that. But so this version of Laurie Strode is sort of a doomsday prepper behind electrified fences, and she's well armed, and she's got spotlights on her property, and she apparently lives right outside the town of Haddonfield in this fortified compound. And these podcasters come to her and they say, you know, they want to basically reunite her with Michael, who, by the way, is not her brother anymore. That's a big one. Like, for the first time since the first film, this is the story is that they're not related. They're just, this was a random attack.
Okay.
Because that was a huge thing about the story ever since part 2. Because in part 2, they revealed that they were brother and sister, and that's why he's coming after her. Now we're going backwards. Only the first one happened. He just saw her one day on the sidewalk, and for some reason just targeted her, and apparently is still kind of obsessed.
Like, so do we? I guess we are to assume that he's just trying to kill her, but like to what end?
Well,
like he kills a whole bunch of people that don't matter.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I saw an interview with Jamie Lee Curtis where she was talking about their relationship in terms of this new continuity. And she says that she thinks it's like Michael basically saw her on the street as this lonely girl and became fascinated with her and sort of fell in love with her. And so he has this strange, like, dark love obsession with her. So he just kind of like is coming for her, I guess, to kill her ultimately is what he seems to be doing. But he doesn't just, like in the first movie, if you take that as being his motivation, then he tracks down and kills all of her friends, and then he waits for her to come to the house, and then he attacks her. So he could have easily tracked her down in the first movie and just gone over there and killed her, but instead he's always kind of drawing her toward him. It's almost like a weird.
Yeah, I mean they touch on that in the movie, like some, like, again, psychic something or another. Like, why are they both still going? and it's it's kind of like a scary version of that movie with Will Smith and Charlize Theron.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's sort of like that. Yeah, they're bound together by some force we're not aware of, or
Yeah,
some strange attraction to one another. Sort of fated to always be at each other's throats. And but in this movie, we learned that or that Laurie has a daughter. She was like twice divorced. Like her life has not been well in the past 40 years, and now she's just a recluse. Her daughter
I will
doesn't.
say one of them had to be rich because she's got a nice house that's pretty. So these divorce settlements did okay for her.
Yes, Laurie is probably collecting hella alimony because she's apparently not working. She's just
Yeah,
chilling at the compound. Um,
yeah,
Her daughter, I think, is a psychologist, but that wouldn't have anything to do with Laurie because they don't have any sort of relationship as is established in the movie. Because apparently Laurie was teaching her daughter Karen, who's played by Judy Greer, um, how to be a survivalist, how to fight, and how to. I mean, it's a very feminist type movie. I mean, we should probably say that it's a very like girl power.
sure.
Because you have the three main characters are essentially Laurie, the grandmother, Karen, the daughter, who sort of is resentful of her mother, and then the granddaughter, Allison, Karen's daughter. So she would be Laurie's granddaughter. And she's kind of more accept. She wants to know who her grandmother is. Like, she's heard all the stories from her friends, and they talk about this in the movie that Laurie was the girl that night who survived, and who now is just this crazy old lady at the edge of town, shooting mannequins with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She can afford all those mannequins. Those aren't cheap. You gotta order those in bulk, or they are expensive if you buy mannequins alone.
That's true. That's true. And somebody was telling me, and I don't know this to be true because I didn't really look, but the girl who I watched the movie with, after we were done, she said, "Did you notice those mannequins had genitals?"
Okay.
No, I did not notice that. She was like, "Well, don't they usually look like Ken dolls?" And I was like, "I don't know."
I can give some insight on that. Like I've worked retail for so long. There are different mannequins for different things. So if it is like specifically like an underwear mannequin, it will have like uh I guess expounded upon genitals that are for showcasing the underwear. So she had to specifically pick out junked up mannequins for that.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it wouldn't have been great if during that one of those shooting sequences you just saw like a quick shot of like genitals and they just explode. It would have
Yeah.
it would have really pushed home the feminist, sort of angle.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a weird side note. I don't know. Um, maybe not. I'll watch it again and I'll look for to see if those mannequins have junk or not.
Yep.
But one way or another, Laurie is living out there in the boonies. Her daughter is a psychologist. I don't know if I said that before, but she's basically made a life for herself. She has a husband who I think is a really well written and well acted character.
Yeah, he's a fun dad. He's a fun dad that did not deserve to go, but here we are.
That's right. The poor man, not to jump too far ahead, but he does get murdered. He's he's strangled with some wind chimes and shoved in a cupboard, a la PJ Souls. And and then, that's the thing about Michael. If you've noticed in these movies, particularly the first one and this one, which are the two we're concerning ourselves with, Michael loves to kill people and then hide them in cute places for Laurie to find. And it seems to be part of his psychosis is sort of the idea of Laurie discovering a body of someone she cared about in some weird place and freaking out about it. Because obviously he could have just left people.
Sure. Yeah.
But that seems to be something that he's kind of really into. But anyway, so Allison, the teenage girl, you do have kind of the teenage characters, and she's got a boyfriend. And the boyfriend ultimately is not a very important character because it seems his function is to only get rid of her phone for her and then
Yes.
But she has a couple other friends, three other friends who actually do stuff in the movie. There's like her gal pal Vicky, and Vicky's a babysitter, sort of like Laurie and the girls were in the first one. Allison is apparently she's not a babysitter. She's just having fun as a teenager.
She's just the teen.
Yep, she's just the teenager, but Vicky is our resident babysitter, and then Vicky's boyfriend is, let's see, what's his name? Let me go to my cheat sheet. He
Bert?
is no, no, he's Dave.
Dave.
Dave, yeah, and Dave. I looked at Dave and I thought I know Dave from somewhere, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's Mulder and Scully's kid. Because if you've seen the new season of the X-Files, the guy that plays Dave, it also plays Mulder and Scully's kid. I'd recognize that gizzard anywhere. So he's in the movie, and he kind of gets a classic Halloween death, and pinned to the wall, just like the guy in the first one did. And it's just, that's the thing. This movie's a lot gorier than the first one. The first one had, was all about shock and scare. You didn't see much blood in it. You see a lot of blood in the new Halloween.
It's a new world.
It is a new world. One must be competitive in this new world of horror. But so, and there's also kind of a lot of references to Laurie being sort of the Loomis character in this. Donald Pleasance in the first film was sort of the guy. He was the psychiatrist. He was the guy that knew everything about Michael and was always telling people, he's coming, be careful, he's evil. And in this, Laurie pretty much serves that purpose. She's the one that's telling everybody that doesn't believe, he's coming for us, and I don't care what you say, you think I'm crazy, and of course she turns out to be right, just like Loomis turned out to be right. But we're led to believe when we're watching the movie that this Dr. Sartain character is going to be the new Loomis. In fact, Laurie even says at one point, she's like, oh, so you're the new Loomis, right? Because he's the psychiatrist, he comes from the institution. He seems to have a great interest in Michael, even to the point of riding the transfer bus with him, because that's the thing. Michael is being transferred to another institution. Something happens on the bus off screen, which I thought was kind of cool. The bus.
So you like the ambiguity of the you don't know what happened?
I did kind of like that. Yeah, I did kind of like that. But again, that kind of harkens back to the first one in so much as you never saw Michael break out of the asylum. You just saw the people wandering around, and so this is sort of the same thing. Like there's this guy and his kid, and they drive up, sort of like Loomis and the nurse did in the first one, and they just find crazy people wandering the street, and you don't know what happened, but something happened, and these people are kind of loose, but they're all very benign, seemingly.
Right.
The one guy that's not benign is the one that's missing. But Michael actually kills a kid there. The man and his son that stop, he murders this little boy. So you go, oh, wow. So that's the first time I remember him killing a kid.
Yeah. Well, I think with a lot of these kills, I don't feel like there was an excess amount of kills over the whole thing, because there's certainly movies with more. And there's overall, I feel like there's some type of symbolism to a lot of stuff that I just don't like break them down enough, movies enough to like get a whole lot of it. But I feel like there's a lot of things that I missed, and maybe if I had insight as to why things happen, like when you kill a kid like that on screen and show it, there's got to be a point to it. Usually you avoid killing kids because that makes you dislike somebody or a pet, and so when you show the Shape or Michael Myers kill the child, that has to mean something rather than he just killed a kid.
Mm-hmm. Is that kind of the way did you not buy the killing of the kid?
I don't know. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he killed a kid, like if they mentioned it, but showing him kill the kid, that's something that is totally different than just mentioning it. And so, and the kid walked around with a gun. So I don't know if it's like, what would you impress upon that? So like, if you had to put a meaning on him killing a child, and I'm not familiar if he killed children in the other ones, but why would he?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't know. I think it may have been a shock thing, I think it may have been maybe just for the audience's purpose. Because just before that, the kid, as you said, is walking around with a rifle because him and his pop are going hunting, evidently. I mean, that's what we're kind of led to believe. And
yes. He wants to be at dance, but he has to go hunting now.
That's right. His dad. That's right. I'd forgotten that part. His dad's making him go hunting. And he goes into the bus and he shoots Dr. Sartain. The kid does. Mm-hmm. Sartain pops up and the kid plugs him. Plugs a superficial wound in the shoulder, which You know, but you don't know that at the time. You're like, this fucking kid just shot the Dr. Loomis, the new doctor.
Yeah.
And then the kid gets killed by Michael, who then steals the pop's car because he's already killed the father. He broke his neck off screen, but he does kill the kid on screen. And then hightails it back to Haddonfield in search of theoretically in search of Laurie. I mean, that's the only reason he would go back to Haddonfield. Along the way, he stops in at a gas station to obtain another vehicle, and he happens to obtain the vehicle of the podcasters. Ironically enough, because they're stopped there for a bathroom break, and Michael kills the fuck out of them. He actually he kills the podcasters, and then he kills the people at the gas station, and he's just killing everybody in broad daylight.
With that though, so like is it perchance, if we're going to take the angle of the supernatural, or is he drawn first to his mask? Because it seemed to have some type of effect on him and things around him. And so is he drawn first to his persona or whatever mask does to him? And so he finds it that way. Or is it just like accidentally? He's like, hey, I saw those guys. They have that mask, because he couldn't have known when they were going to be at that same gas station. There's no way. And so, I mean, I know that's his thing, but supernaturally, maybe he is drawn to the mask and that led him there.
That's an interesting point. I didn't really think about that. Because that's the scene where he takes, because as we said before, the podcaster's friend at the Attorney General's office pulls out the mask, and so they have it in the trunk of their car, and after he kills them, that's how he obtains the mask. That's a good point. I don't know. That's one of those unanswered questions. Because it is kind of random that he would just happen across these people that, kind of accosted him in the checkerboard wonder.
We've only seen it the one time. Like maybe we just missed. Like, in his presence, did they mention where they were going? I mean, did they visit Laurie before or after that scene?
They visited Laurie after.
Okay, so I mean, maybe he went there assuming they would be somewhere nearby. Like, we don't know if that's the first place he stopped. He could have got some McDonald's tea or something, and then was like, "Hey, I recognize that car. The mask is in there."
That's right. Yeah. And he kills them, and takes their car and his mask. He's like, bitches.
Yeah.
No. Because this is the mask from the first movie, because obviously not literally, but in the story, it's the mask from the first movie. It's all like aged and weathered, and it was in the evidence locker, and this podcaster got it. So yeah, he gets the mask back, and then he heads off to Haddonfield, and then you have some really cool, like, kind of reminiscent of Halloween 2 shots where the camera is steady camming around, following him, and there's some really cool orchestrated one shot that they actually did apparently in one shot without a lot of trickery, where he's going and back to woodsheds, grabs a hammer, goes into a house, kills a woman with the hammer, takes her knife, goes out, goes into another house, kills another one, and all this is in one shot, which, from a directing perspective, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of
pretty awesome. Yeah. Now, that was we got the theme music the first time when he gets the mask, right? Didn't it started playing then?
Yeah.
And then it plays when he's roaming the yards in Halloween. And so, to me, that was a big thing, because I know that music is very iconic, and I mean, it still is good, but I feel like even there, that's already the second use, and it could have been more. I feel like they overused it. Like,
really?
It felt a few times a little hollow. Yeah, and I know they did different versions of it. Like, I heard a few different ways they were playing it, but I think it was Rocky, the newest Rocky Balboa, when they did it. We all know that the Rocky theme song. They did it one time in that movie at the very end, so it hits you, and you're like, yeah, like you get the tingles. And then, like, with Halloween, it's like that first time you hear, like, okay, I'm on board. And then, like, by the fifth time, you're like, okay, so this is just what they're forcing that music too many times. Like, it lost gravity to have it played that often.
Yeah, well, that's true, because that music is just so iconic. You go, oh, wow. And yeah, you're right. I think if you used it less, you would probably have a greater impact. It's sort of like you mentioned the Rocky theme. It's sort of like James Bond. They kind of wait till he's doing something really cool to hit the old all that. That's a good point. I didn't really think about that. Yeah, because they use it quite a few times, especially compared to some of the other movies where they do use it just when Michael is doing something really different or kind of visually interesting, you'll hear that music. There's a couple pieces of music in here with John Carpenter that are new that really struck me when I was watching it. Like, oh, well, that's really cool.
Yeah, they had like a like more of like a I don't even know what the instrument would be, but like in the piano, like those really loud, like the bangs, like that was like maybe toward the later 75% of the movie when they started adding that in there, and that felt effective. I was like, okay, that's new and like is more chilling rather than just like passing by while he's walking through a sheet. You shouldn't play the piano music all the time.
Right. Yeah. I think that may have been. I think that may have been a fan benefit type thing of putting it in
Yeah.
quite that much, and probably use it less would have been a little bit better. Because at this point, it kind of takes a while for you to get in this movie to Halloween, the day Halloween in the story, which is interesting because when it pops up, it's like, they do the old thing where it's like October 31st, 2018, like in the original where you actually know, okay, now this is the day.
Yeah.
And they do that in all the other ones too, but with the title card and the orange font, and it looks exactly like the one from the original, so it kind of has a little more of a kind of a cool impact for fans, I think, when they see that pop up. But they have like a Halloween party with the teenagers, and Allison, who's Laurie's granddaughter, and her friends go to this party, and Karen is kind of like, she's just a teenager, nothing's going to happen. So she's not really worried. Laurie is worried all the time because she knows that Michael is coming back. She actually watches the transfer bus leave the institution before the wreckage that we were talking about before, where Michael escapes. She's not around for the actual escape, but when she hears about it on the news, she goes into full mode, goes over to her daughter's house and says, "You don't have a security system. What are you doing? I told you he was going to get out. And we got to go to my place because it's fortified." And so she's trying to rally the troops. And Karen's not interested. The kid's off having fun with her friends on Halloween. They go to a little dance where, she loses her phone. Because that's the thing about modern horror. You got to make them lose the phone because how else,
Yeah.
Because everybody's connected nowadays. So it'd just be too easy to call the cops or call your mom or call your grandma or text them or something. So her phone gets thrown into a big bowl of pudding.
Yeah. And I mean, we've missed a lot, like going back a little bit to where, like, the theme, I think we talked about it a little bit, even before the party, we meet some of these teenagers and stuff. And so I don't know if we're meant to care about them or not, like when they die, that doesn't matter. But like their purpose in the story is almost negligible. And there's not it's like it was just like, well, we got to have her lose her phone. So let's have her have a boyfriend who that she argues with. It was like backwards, retroactively written, because there's no hint that he is a bad guy. It seems like he's trying really hard to meet the family and be nice. There's no hint that he's going to cheat or that he has an alcohol problem that comes up at the party. There's no hint that the friend, you said Oscar is his name, the kind of the dorky kid. Like, there's no hint that he likes the girl. It's just like it's just all really weird and out of nowhere when all it starts happening. And for him to cheat on her and then be like, you know what? I'm tired of your phone. I wouldn't have cheated if it wasn't for your phone. It's going in the pudding. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right, because he throws it into the Halloween themed pudding and it's gone. And then you go, oh, okay, well, now I get it story-wise. But there are some things you like mentioning that I can say there are other things that were retroactively written, kind of obviously, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think there's a plot twist that we'll talk about here in a minute that was kind of jarring because it seemed like they threw it in there because, well, we need a shock. And so, but it's not really set up and it doesn't really go anywhere. It's sort of like the whole thing of, Michael, just say one word. It's just something that's set up that doesn't really, not ultimately really all that important because the movie just goes to where it's going to go anyway. Laurie faces off with Michael. I mean, I think, we'll just go ahead and say it. Whether the psychiatrist was a bad guy or not really doesn't affect Laurie facing off with Michael.
No.
And that is sort of, the twist that gets thrown on you. And and now that we're talking about, the teenagers, sort of my point of view was almost that you could have cut some of that teenager stuff and maybe set up the plot twist of Dr. Sartan a little more.
Yeah, absolutely.
because I think that would have helped, since, you know, her losing her phone, you could do that in any number of ways without creating a boyfriend character.
Yeah.
I mean, these phones, they break if you look at them the wrong way, right?
Sure.
So you could do it any which way. But so instead of like having the boyfriend character, maybe devote that scene to something else about Dr. Sartan or his relationship with Michael, because ultimately it turns out to be a really weird, twisted relationship.
Mhm.
Far more twisted. He's not the benign, like, you know, soothsayer that Dr. Loomis
Well,
was.
okay, so let's get into more theme, I guess, or like hidden meaning. So if he doesn't have a name, if he's not Michael Myers, like he is sort of like the ring in Lord of the Rings, where like if you are around him, he messes up your life, it seems like. Because I'm sure this guy has plenty of other patients, like Dr. Sartain does. And so he gets into your head somehow and makes you interested in them. And like the people that like he hasn't, I guess, dealt with outside, like the podcasters and Sartain, they're really interested in hearing him talk for whatever reason, and it like drives them crazy. So like maybe if we're gonna get into what the character means, like is he a representation of what to them? Like, is it closure for like a family with the three women in the film, or is it like the doctor, what does he need him to say something for, to like prove he's right? Like, or the podcasters, is it to show like, are you sorry? Like, it's like he is more of a looming guilt or just something. He's representative of something, but I can't put it into a word. Maybe he's supposed to be something different for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing, because if you think about it from that point of view, you could say, if you look at the characters, even going back to the first one, the one thing that is consistent is you have a person who's living a relatively stable life. Michael comes into it, and then suddenly everything in their life changes for the negative. I mean, Lori was a normal shy girl, and now her life for obviously 40 years has been destroyed simply because this force of nature just came freight training into it and just destroyed everything. And sort of like when he goes from house to house in the town, there's no rhyme or reason to it. He's just there's a house, there are people in it, he walks into it, and it's just like a freight train came through the house, and suddenly you're dead. Everybody
Yeah,
now.
that's a good point. Like, what is his reasoning behind it? Like, was he going into old houses that were supposed to be uh where she was, or is he just like legitimately just like killing people? Like for instance, like the girl that he bangs her head and stabs her in the throat. Like he looked at her out the window, he goes in, he kills her, and like leaves. So why did he go in that house to begin with? Because he's walking by hundreds of kids and doesn't do anything to them, and adults. So what is it specifically about that house that makes him go into it?
I don't know. And it's a good question. Is it just purely random? Is he just selecting these people because it seems that he's just selecting people at total random? And he has a weird, it's not even a moral sense, but he has a weird sense because he kills the one kid, but he doesn't kill the baby. There's a moment where he's walking through
Yeah.
the house, and he could very easily just, skewer
Well,
this
maybe
baby.
okay. So maybe looking at it like that, is it a threat to him? So I think it kills the kid because the kid did shoot Dr. Sartain, and the kid was stopping his way out, so he had to kill him to get to his objective, which was the car. And so when he kills this lady that he hit her head and stabbed her, wasn't Michael Myers news on the TV? And she was like looking out the window for him. And so maybe he was like, if she's attempting to be perceptive of him, he's got to get rid of her so she doesn't see him. Like
It
she
could
can't
be.
spread news.
Yeah, and he does, and he uses it to get his weapon of choice, which is a knife.
Mm.
He uses the hammer to get, because obviously his weapon of choice is a knife.
I did like that where he has the weapon. He doesn't like thoughtfully put it down. He just like has it in his hand and like drops it and then like goes to the next thing. I do like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Michael loves his kitchen knives. It's a very interesting idea, because it can even hold up to this, because all of these people are just living their lives, and then this force comes into their lives, and just for no apparent reason other than just randomness, because the only house he goes into that has any connection to Laurie is not even directly connected to her. It's the house that Vicky is babysitting at, and Vicky
Yeah.
is Allison's best friend, Laurie's granddaughter. A little bit disappointed in that because the trailer kind of fucked up a huge scare in that. Because in the trailer, obviously, you see Vicky trying to close the door. She opens it. Michael's in there.
Yeah.
So you see the movie and the kid's sitting in his bed and he looks at the clock. You already know what's going to happen. So that was a little bit of a disappointment to me, just in terms of, maybe trailers showing a little too much. But that aside, he does that connects back to Allison, and maybe it was totally random, but it seems odd that it would be totally random. It just happens to be Laurie's granddaughter's best friend.
There are 6 houses in Haddonfield, and that's it. So he just has to go in each one over and over, like in a loop, until he finds what he's looking for.
That's right. It's this house with the house with the old woman that looks like the old woman from part 2, and then there's the girl who gets her throat slit, and then right next door is Vicky and the town's most hilarious young boy, who I know some fans didn't like it. They thought it was too funny or too obvious. I thought that kid was really good. I laughed quite a bit at that scene. But I see we're kind of getting to the last 20 minutes here. We'll go a little bit further into the story just so that we don't run out of time before we get to the dramatic conclusion. So from here, we see Laurie kind of buddies up with an old friend from school for a minute who is now a sheriff's deputy who's played by Will Patton, great voice. He can read the hell out of an audiobook. But he plays Deputy Hawkins. And he is in the story kind of arbitrarily for such a seasoned actor. He doesn't really play a huge part in it other than to be a part of the big surprise that's coming up, which is where he and Dr. Sartain are sort of riding together, sort of like Loomis and Sheriff did in the first movie. They're kind of trying to scope out the neighborhood to find Michael, and they spot him, and they just fucking hit him with a car. Hawkins just hits him with the car, and they theoretically save Allison and put her in the back of the squad car. Sartain goes over and checks Michael's pulse and says that he's dead. And you're like, oh, okay. That's
cool.
That's anticlimactic. But of course, he's not dead. And not only is he not dead, but this is the scene where we realize that Dr. Sartain is actually a crazy fucker who is obsessed with Michael Myers and is obsessed with him talking like everyone else seems to be, but is sort of kind of obsessed with the idea of him. What is it? Is it just that he's a representation of evil? Is that what he is? I can't really quite figure out what Sartain was obsessed with.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like the way he said he's read every file on him, and it's the only person ever that's just evil. They can't figure out why or what led it. It's just he's just bad all the way through and through.
Yes, and Sartain wants to know why. And Michael Michael doesn't really care as long as Sartain takes him to Laurie, which is what Sartain does. He drives him out to Laurie's house because he's like, I'm going to force this confrontation. And he's got Allison still in the back of the car, actually locked into the car with Michael sitting beside her in one of those cop cars where, the latch on the back doesn't open, so she can't get out unless you open it from the outside. What happens ultimately there is Sartain crashes the car outside Laurie's compound. Michael is like, I know you're obsessed with me. He doesn't say this, but seems to say, I know you're obsessed with me, but guess what? I don't like you. And he takes his foot and he stomps Sartain's head. And Sartain's head explodes like a large blood-filled pimple. I mean, it obliterates him.
So from there, though, so this was something that I think one of the twists that we talked about, that I would have liked it so much more if we learned that he did cause the bus crash. I would have liked that so much more. And I also thought there was a few really weird cuts. Like, so you remember seeing when the bus crashed, the dad and the kid pulled up, they catch one of the patients in the headlights and he stares at him for a minute, just weird. And then he walks on. And then later when the doctor's going from the house to house with the 2 cops, they kept cutting to the cops' faces in an odd way. And I was like, these cops are dressed up patients. Like, he's already gotten rid of those real cops and taken their uniforms to further his agenda. And I was like, this is going to be an interesting thing, that he's setting all this up. Like, he's making them feel comfortable enough with him to where that he can lead Michael there easier. And so when that didn't pan out, I was like, they missed so much. Like they set up this thing that could have been a really cool plot twist that you could have guessed it was going to happen, other than the actor who plays Dr. Sartain being creepy looking, because that's all we had to go off of.
That's really that's really interesting. That would have been so much better than some of those
Yeah,
teenage scenes, you know?
absolutely. Yeah, and if you watch, so if you do revisit it, look look at the way they cut around him to those officers' faces. And I mean, I'm wrong, obviously, because they didn't do it, but I would have put money on it that that guy they pulled up on with the headlights was one of those officers. And I was like, for sure, like, oh, this is good. I like what they're doing. But then they stomped his head and he killed somebody, and it's like, oh wait, this doesn't mean anything actually.
Just kind of goes nowhere. But man, that would have been so. I didn't even think about that, but that actually makes a lot of sense. That would have been so much cooler.
Yeah.
And again, that would just to fill out and flesh out Sartain, so that it's not just a plot twist that's like, okay, well, that's sort of interesting, but then it's not nothing because he just gets his head completely obliterated, because Michael Myers does have super strength in this.
Right. Yeah. And again, it goes back into the if you have to justify things, you have to reach into supernatural. Like this psychiatrist who's been doing it, we are to assume legally and ethically for his whole career. And then suddenly it's like, you know what, I'm going to kill a cop to let Michael Myers get to this goal. It's really strange to have that all of a sudden happen unless Michael Myers affects you strangely by him encountering you, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if that was included in the story in some way, that would justify it so much more. Just to say, well, the Michael Myers evil somehow leaked into this Dr. Sartain and is kind of filling him over 40 years with.
I'm gonna have to move locations. I'm on 4% battery. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, that's really interesting. Wow, yeah. But while Jarrod is moving, I'll kind of fill you in on what happens next. What happens next is you have Sartain, and he's outside. He gets his head smashed. Michael somehow figures out. I love how we're just kind of constantly cutting back and forth.
All right, we're good. All right, got it.
Random images of Jarrod as he moves. But anyway, so Michael gets through Laurie's fortifications off screen. Allison gets onto the property as well. And basically what happens then is you have Laurie. She has created a bunker underneath her house, which is set up earlier in the story, underneath her kitchen bar. You hit a button, the bar moves away, and it leads you down into an underground bunker full of guns and weapons. And she's, like I say, doomsday prepper. She's ready to go at Michael. And so now he's actually on the property. He kills Karen's husband, who is Laurie's son-in-law.
Shameful. That's shameful.
That's right, because he was a cool guy and he was really well played, actually. I really liked the son-in-law character.
And right there, too, we'll go back to why the teens are pointless in this movie. Like, it shows the dad and the boyfriend, like, hitting it off. And so there wasn't even a hint there that the boyfriend was going to be bad because the dad didn't pick it up. And then we also just like the dad more, and then you kill the dad. Like, what are you doing, guys?
Right. I'm partly laughing at that and partly laughing at the new backdrop behind your head.
Yeah, it's a good tapestry, and then there's a little cat over here, and so we're feeling it.
But it seems appropriate because now we've moved into even the craziest section of the movie, which is where basically Act 3 showdown between Laurie and Michael. Laurie has set up her house for this very moment, as is evidenced by the fact that every room she has is rigged to where she can hit a button and the door like a giant metal gate will come down and seal off the room. So when Michael gains access to Laurie's house, she takes the daughter, Karen, and puts her down in the fortified basement bunker thing and closes the bar. So Michael doesn't even know she's down there. That's kind of the whole point. You hide away down there until he goes away. Allison is on the property. She's running around. There's a kind of an unintentionally funny moment, for me anyway. I don't know what you thought about it, Jarrod, but there's a scene where Allison's running through the woods and she comes across the shooting gallery with all the mannequins.
Yeah.
And she falls down, and then like you just random scene where Allison is looking around at all the different mannequins and she just goes, ah, and then it cuts. Like she was terrified by those mannequins, and
That right there, I think she's scared of her grandma. Like my grandmother did this. That's so creepy.
yeah, and she's like, these mannequins have genitals. What's going on here?
Yeah.
But anyway, so then we cut back to the house, and Lori's in the house. She's going room by room with the rifle. She's hitting these buttons, sealing off the room. So you're basically making it where Michael only has one place to go, and that's wherever she is. And then she's going to plug his ass, which we learned at the end of the last movie doesn't really work very well.
So you think that's what that was for? Not to trap him in a room, but to like slowly narrow him down, like his options?
Yeah, kind of what I thought. It was to narrow it down so that they would just have a place where she could just take him out, because she's got all her weapons and she's got a knife. She's packing like a hunting knife in her belt. She's ready.
Well, it was just I think the last section of this movie to me was like the sloppiest. Like so much of it didn't make sense to me. Because she has every floodlight available on the house, right? So you think you turn it on, but when they see him, she turns them off. And then she gets right up on the door, even though she's probably rigged it so he can only get in one way. And so, like, if you want to kill him, don't get up against the window where you just saw him. Like, he's going to reach in and get you like he does. And you've been preparing for all this. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens in this scene that I don't like. That's what really made it fall apart to me. It was really long and drawn out, and a lot of it didn't make sense.
Yeah, it is kind of at the ending. It kind of falls apart a little bit because it's kind of cool and they have a confrontation, but I don't know. To me, it wasn't just the most mind-blowing confrontation. I mean, essentially, they get cornered into a room with more of those mannequins. He pops. He's one of the mannequins. Which is which isn't a huge jump scare, but he's one of the mannequins, and he grabs her, and they kind of struggle. This is kind of set up where it's obvious there's not much of a physical match between them. I mean, he's manhandling her all over the place. He's got her up against the wall. He's choking her. She's got her weapon. She manages to when he's trying to get in the house, I should probably point out, she's got a shotgun, and she blows off a couple of his fingers. Yeah. So he's wounded, and he does react as if a wounded person would react. Because I think he got
shot. He got shot before too when he was walking around in the around the houses when she first saw him.
Yeah,
she shot him in the shoulder.
That's right. She does. She shoots him once when her and Hawkins are out looking for him, and then she blows off part of his hand with a shotgun. And she kind of uses that against him when they're engaged in their little fisticuffs hand to hand, because she grabs onto it and he reacts like, "Oh shit, that hurt," like a human would do, which is kind of interesting. And then I think he just throws her out a window, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I think that was an homage to the first one, right? Because they shoot him out of a window, and then she falls out the window. Yeah, she
falls out the window, and there were a couple of scenes in this where kind of Laurie did what Michael did in the first one. It's like Michael throws Laurie out of the window, and he looks down, she's there, and then he looks away and cuts back down, and then she's gone, and the grass shows her impression where she was, sort of like him at the end of the first movie. So
Michael is the victim in this, so he is lured by this sick family. Like, he's just escaped from a mental house. He doesn't have he wants to get his mask and go on, but they have lured him into this house because she's been planning it for years. She wants him there. She wants to get him there. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't know how to get anywhere. He's been locked up for 30 years. He doesn't know how to use GPS, probably not a map. He's too proud to ask for directions. This is not Michael's fault.
That's right. Michael doesn't even he doesn't know how to use one of those smartphones. He gets out and he's like, "What the fuck is this world all about? These cars, what's going on here? What's cruise control?" And he's trying to drive around.
Siri.
Yeah, that would have been great. Like if you had a scene where Laurie was like, "Alexa," and Alexa comes on and Michael's like, "What's that?" It's like distracts him, and then she shoots him. Again, that probably would have been one of those unintentional laugh things that, like the girl in the, like Allison with the mannequins. She's like, "I've never seen a mannequin." Bah! Cut to black. But I probably, if I could have set up the whole bunker thing a little more, the big shock or the big twist at the end would have been more. I don't know, but basically what happens is, this bunker I was telling you about, it's actually quite important. Because Karen and Allison are eventually put down there, and Michael is trying to get down there to them. He uses that superhuman strength of his to get the bunker entrance is covered by a bar in the kitchen. So he's banging this bar, and he's basically ripping it up out of the floor so he can get to them. And Lori has disappeared. She went out the window, fell in the grass, and has vanished. And we don't know where she is for a while. So he's just going for the daughter and the granddaughter. So there's a little bit of a fight thing down below. Judy Greer, who, I mean, as an actress, I'm not a huge fan of. I'll just have to say it. But she has a cool little moment where she kind of turns the tables on Michael, and she shoots him, and then he goes tumbling down into the basement. And she tries to get up with the granddaughter, and Lori showed up again by now. And long story short,
Well, no, remember, so Judy Greer does the thing where she fakes that she can't kill him, and he comes out, and but then like she shoots him, right? But then at the same time, Lori comes from behind him and like stabs him.
Yeah, stabs him with the knife.
Yeah, but there are 1,500 guns around the house. If this was your plan to lure him out, you shot him in the front, just shoot him in the back of the head, and it's done. But she has to like do a cool thing with a lighter and then kick him down the stairs. It's silly.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's 1,500 guns in the house, and like 49.99 are down in the basement where they are.
Yes.
You know, you could just literally turn around and grab about 12 weapons. Anyone, Allison or Karen, but they don't. Mm-hmm. Allison already has one. She has the one that has her engraved name on it from when she was a little girl. So it kind of goes back to the twisted childhood thing, which it's a good thing Lori taught her how to use all this shit, because she shoots Michael, and then Lori stabs him, and Allison doesn't really do too much in that scene, as I recall.
Did we need Allison in this movie at all?
That's a good question.
Ponder on it. We don't have time, but think on that.
Yes, I'll get back to you on that one. That's going to take a minute or two to think about if we actually needed Allison. I would say maybe yes, but let me think it over, and I'll get back. But sort of the twist that ultimately happens at the very, very end of the movie is the bunker that's underneath the kitchen that's fortified isn't actually for the protection of the people in it. It's a trap so that if you get Michael down in there, you can hit this thing, and these bars will come across the opening of it, and you're basically caging him down there. And then
it's a trap filled with guns and food.
Exactly. So now he can survive forever with food and a lot of ammunition. Which that's a very good point. And then what's happened is the whole house is rigged with like gas tubing. So Lori can just, once she's trapped him down there, she can destroy her own home by hitting this by hitting this thing, and this gas gets pumped into every room in the house. Not just the basement, mind you, but every room in the house is pumped full of gas. And then there's like a pilot light. And so her and her daughter and her granddaughter, they set the fire, and you see Michael trapped down there. And this is sort of the moment in the movie when I went, oh, kind of seen Michael get burned up before. In fact, I've kind of seen that twice, you know. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, where it ends with they pull him out of the dream and they try to kill him. You go, wow, you know, we've kind of already seen this.
Okay.
You could have maybe come up with something else. I mean, my personal thing that I'd love to see is Lori take a stick of dynamite, stick it right up his ass, and blow him to bits. But they don't want to do that because of the grossness. You know, you're still going to make sequels to this thing. Right. So in lieu of putting the stick of dynamite up his ass and blowing him to bits, which would be awesome to see Lori do that, to finally just get rid of him, and there's no way he's coming back. Instead of that, you just see him down in the basement with fire billowing around him. They escape the house. You get a couple kind of random shots around the house. You get a shot even in the basement with it on fire, and you see Michael's not down there. It's a very quick shot, but it's in there. And you go, oh, fuck. So this whole big confrontation, he just escapes again, which is what he does, apparently, because we don't see him escape. We just see the basement with fire, and he's not down there.
He covered himself in those preserves to absorb the heat, and he's fine.
Yeah, there was a fire blanket down there, like in Panic Room, you know, where they cover themselves with a fire blanket and the fire goes on. And that's what he threw that over him, and he just waited for the fire to subside because, I mean, you know, it's not like he got blown up or anything. Like
she could have. So, like your house, you caught your whole house on fire. If you just trap him down there with a gas leak, he'll die. You don't have to light your house on fire.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, and if it's fortified, if you fireproof the bunker, couldn't you just incinerate the bunker and save the house?
Yeah. So moving on.
But anyway, so the film ends with Lori and her daughter Karen and her granddaughter Allison, who we've not entirely decided yet needed to be in the movie or not. Driving away in the back of a truck, and the camera moves down and does like a '70s freeze frame on the knife and
On the knife. Yeah, but so that kind of goes to me again, like the same thing as you killed the kid on screen. Her holding, oh, lost it. Sorry, I'll try that. So it goes to the same thing of you killed the kid on screen. That means something. You zoomed in on them with the knife. So what is Michael Myers in you? If that's it was such a weird thing to end on to me that it has to be some symbolism that I just missed, which makes me feel like you guys understand your movie better than me, obviously. So what am I missing? Or what am I'm looking for things. I'm actively looking to try to figure out what it means, and I can't. So what is it?
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think the theme that you brought up throughout this discussion of the idea of Michael seeping into people or his evil, since we are going back to the John Carpenter thing of it's a force of evil more than it's a man, that the idea of that seeping into people, like Sartain, like even Allison, obviously Laurie, because there are obvious references to Laurie as Michael throughout the movie, which we didn't get into in great detail. But if you're a fan of Halloween and you watch this movie, they're like neon signs. It's like, oh, obviously that's Laurie as Michael. So I don't know. That's a really interesting thing to think about, man. That's not something that I thought about in sort of a great detail, but now that you mention it, it makes a lot of sense with this movie, especially thinking about how it all plays out and how the characters are depicted, and even the freeze frame at the end of Allison holding that knife covered in blood, and Michael's blood, incidentally, and that okay. So I guess this is going to continue, and the evil is seeped into her, maybe, or it's now going to affect her life in the way it affected Laurie's.
Yeah, I tried not to cheat. Like I didn't read any since we talked about doing this. I haven't like gone and I usually like to read. Like if I have a theory, I'll go and read a bunch of reviews to see if like anybody mirrored it or figured out something that I didn't. So I tried not to read anything for this so I can sound dumb as I probably am. But there could be answers to these things that are out there, and I don't know. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it gives us something to think about, and we'll have to continue to think about it privately, Jarrod. We've about run out of time on this show because there's so much to talk about, and these hours go by so quickly. We kind of breezed over, but we got to get pretty deep into certain elements of it.
Sure.
And a lot of things I think we can leave as a big question mark to think about, like some of the plot twists that didn't really go anywhere. But
so what'd you rate it, Elsie? What'd you give it? 1 to 10. What was your rating?
honestly, as much as I talk about these flaws here and there, being a person who makes movies and has been in movies, I know how hard it is to make something that's even remotely watchable. So this movie is far above being remotely watchable. I think it's maybe my third favorite in the series, behind the first two. Like if you say Halloween 1, Halloween 2, pause, 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 you can say this new Halloween 2018. I think it's good. And, you could go and point out flaws and things that you could do differently, I know there's a certain element of it where it might sound like me or Jarrod are being like kind of backseat drivers, but I would say I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I didn't hate this movie. I give it maybe like a low B, like a high mid C, somewhere in there. Like it was definitely watched. I'm not angry that I watched it. It was fine. And it's like, I'm sure a lot of horror movies, they fall apart when you start breaking them down. I mean, a lot of movies do. There was just some that like it was hard for me to follow. And if I can realize some problems while you're watching it, i.e. the teens, it's distracting. Like if it can get me through it and I think about it later, it's much better for it. But if I'm distracted during the movie, like what the hell is this person's purpose? Then that's a negative aspect to me.
Yeah. If I wanted to do like a letter rating, I'd probably say a B minus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with a little reservation, maybe a C, but B minus, we'll say.
Sure.
Yeah, because I'll watch it again. In fact, I kind of look forward to seeing it again and seeing, things. A lot of references I think I missed. Little nods to the other ones.
If they had leaned into the first half, that opening scene to me, like I said, had like a really good vibe, and even like him running around killing people. I like the energy of it and like the whole feel, and then just the second half of it is when I'm just like, blah. okay.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, yeah, I agree. But we're kind of getting to the point now where we got to wrap it up.
Cool.
Jarrod, this was actually a lot of fun discussion about Halloween 2018. Well, thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We'll have to do this again sometime. This was a fun film discussion. I want to also remind you guys before we head out that my film Spiritus here is available. Get in touch with me. I'll let you know how you can get it. And The Butcher's Bluff Indiegogo campaign underway. New perks, new video. Go check it out. You can find how in the YouTube description and the Facebook comments and the thread on Twitter. So with all that said, thanks for watching our Halloween discussion. We could go on for probably ever on this and get really deep into it, but I think we talked about some real interesting points. So until next week, I want to thank you guys for joining us and take care of yourselves.